I had the game pulled up, so let's see what all the hubbub is about. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I hate this game. Okay, I did lie to you. I don't really hate this game. But sitting here after beating it, I feel conflicted. I wouldn't even call this game bad by any means, other than a few select areas that I hate. Pepper Grinder has some of the highest highs I've ever seen in a platformer, but also some of the lowest lows. So that's where I sit here conflicted. Now I've unlocked the kid in Super Meat Boy, so you know I've been in the dumps in terms of Toughest Nails, 2D indie platformers, and Pepper Grinder can get there in some cases. So there's no point in beating around the bush anymore. So let's get into it. Starting with the visuals, because, that's the first thing you see. And this game has some great pixel art. Some things can look a bit overly simplistic, but it never ends up making platforming more difficult. And in case you've had your eyes closed this entire time since you've started this video, or maybe you're blind, this game is exploding in colors. Everything in this game has a vibrancy that looks like a rainbow threw up all over it, but in a good way. Not the way in that it's a deluge of colors that makes your eyes bleed. From the bright blues that signify when you need the boost, and all the different colors of gems. It really makes me want to grab as many of these as I can. Then there's the soundtrack, which is honestly one of the best aspects of the game. Even though it may be a throwback to the graphics of yore, that does not mean that you're stuck with the beats and boops of the old. This music is bopping. It's not afraid to bring out the orchestra in some cases, and you can really feel its impact. I can see why they're selling the soundtrack on its own. If you get to the end of this video and decide you don't want to play it, at least buy the soundtrack. It's a banger, and it definitely helped relieve some of the frustration. Only some of it, however. Now onto what this game is actually about. The story here is about as basic as you can get. You crash land on an unknown island with plenty of booty. Booty. Some human narwhal hybrids and their leader, Mint, this lady, steal your money and it's time to get it back. Using this random drill you find, which you are inexplicably able to use masterfully right off the bat. That's really it. You travel through a beach area, lava hell world, snowy mountains, and a spooky graveyard area. I'll give the game props for not forcing a desert world onto us, even if sands and a desert would be a perfect obstacle for a game about drilling through stuff. Once we make it to the end, it turns out Mint isn't actually the leader, as this weird narwhal monster with a drill for a head called Emperor Nazo is the real villain. He looks adequately creepy. I don't know how he's animated, but big props, because the way he moves really amplifies the creepiness factor. That's all I know about this guy. He kinda comes out of nowhere. Anyways, he dies after, transforming into this thing. And Pepper, that's the main character's name by the way, that's why it's called Pepper Grinder, haha, very funny, wins with the help of Mint, and we end with her swimming in Nazo's giant sea of money. All in all, there's not much to say. There's barely anything here really, in terms of story. Maybe there's some deeper narrative going on here, underneath the surface, but it isn't very obvious, so I won't really comment much further on it. And I'm not exactly in the mood to replay the game, to look for the deeper meaning. It truly does feel like a plot of an 80s NES game. There are games out there that throw back to the style, that don't use it as a reason to have no story. Hell, I think Super Meat Boy even has more story than this. There's not even any cutscenes or anything to try to establish some kind of overarching story. It's just Pepper chasing down the narwhals. That's it. Despite only having a speck of a story, it does have its charm though. I mean, look at these guys. Aren't they so goofy looking? Look at the swimming animation again. Adorable. So yeah, there isn't much of a story to talk about, so let's move on to the gameplay, and where shit really starts to hit the fan, but also doesn't really. Let's just get into it. So you gotta drill. And you drill stuff. You have to get to the end of the stage and raise a flagpole. Just like the plumber game! There are two different types of platforming you'll be doing. The drilling, where you can glide through the ground and launch yourself to other areas using everybody's favorite math subject, geometry. Then the on-foot gameplay, where you have some of the most annoying platforming I've experienced in some time. Clearly, the majority of the death time was in making the drilling as fun as possible to balance out the stiffness that the normal platforming brings. You also get access to a grappling hook, which gets points from me in any context. If it was actually fun to use, the way you launch yourself after activating it can be quite jank at times. Mostly because you have to press the R2 button, but you're most likely holding it down as that's how you drill. So you have to let go of it and then press it again to launch. But considering how fast you swing most of the time, the angle you leave at will be nowhere close to where you need to be to actually make the jump that you're trying to do, so it can be a bit frustrating. So yeah, it kinda sucks. Along the stages, you'll fight enemies, drill through copious amounts of dirt, water, and snow, and collect money in all sorts of ways by finding gems and rocks, breaking pottery, and even stealing enemies' wallets. There are 5 big pirate coins that are often hidden inside breakable ceilings or floors denoted with this cracked texture, so you have to be on the lookout for these. I found most of them by the end of the game, but I have no intention of going back to find the rest. After a certain stage in a world, you'll unlock a shop where you can spend your hard-earned money and big pirate coins for things like extra health, stickers that you can place on sticker pages, keys to open secret stages, and finally, different colors for your hair and cape, so that's very cool. You'll go through 4 to 5 stages depending on the world, and it ends with a climactic boss fight. Most stages bring a new gimmick to the table, or combine 2 previous ones together to make something new, like these cannons that blast you in a direction. Some of the sections involving these can get precise, and are honestly the most fun I had playing this game. So these cannons ask the question that everybody's been wondering. Do you like Donkey Kong Country? These gray blobs that you can get stuck in, which work a lot better in concept than execution. I mean, just look at this. Then there's this robot that you get, which is a bitch to control, but it's fun to run through a bunch of shit. There are plenty more where that came from. You can also pick up a variety of attachments to your drill, like keys to open locks, and rockets that can break blocks in your path. And of course, the game wouldn't be complete if there wasn't a gun. It's like the gods above looked down one day and said, "All indies must have thy guns." My 2 biggest hangups in the gameplay here is this: on-foot control and the boss fights. Oh my god, the boss fights! When playing it, it's clear that the majority of the control was focused on the drilling, which makes a lot of sense considering that that's the big thing this game offers. And that drilling control is top tier. It feels like I'm gliding through butter, and it can be quite exhilarating once you get in a groove and you're hitting all the right spots. It, dare I say, makes you feel like a drill. That's right, you had your time in the sun. Take a hike, buddy. I'm the drill now. I wish the drill was all you did, honestly, but you have your fair share of gameplay where you walk around while holding the drill. The only real problem I have with the drill, trying to drill through a small area, it can be really hard to get the right angle that you want. That's one of the big reasons why the final boss fight sucks. Oh my god, the final boss fight. We'll get there soon enough. It's not so bad when you're using one of the attachments because the game doesn't ask you to do precise platforming most of the time. When you do, however, I think somebody forgot the coyote time, and if you don't know what that is, it's when you jump just slightly after going off a ledge, because it feels way better than running off a platform when you swear you hit the button in time. So there's that, but it's also how jumping feels in general. It's way too gimped and weighty to feel satisfied doing it well, and these platforms are either too small or too far away. So that combined with the previous problem causes, you guessed it, constipation, frustration. On the other side of the coin, there's the boss fights. My god, the boss fights. They range from frustrating to boring, with one exception. The first boss feels a bit misplaced, as it's the second hardest of the 4 in the game, in my opinion. And it's not the fun sort of hard. You gotta lead the big bug onto the ceiling, so you can knock him off, which, in turn, lets you hit the rider on top who wields a gun. It starts off pretty easy, but it's not until you start shooting purple bullets that go through obstacles and are also led in your way. That's fine in concept, but with how small the arena is, you have to be really precise if you're going to avoid getting hit. And sometimes you just get hit by something that doesn't actually hit you, so that sucks. Then there's this boss, Magma Worm, which made me immediately think about Elden Ring. I know I've rarely spent time talking about this character, but I'll need to make my next point. So, Sonic the Hedgehog. Imagine every bad 2D Sonic boss. Now imagine what exactly makes them bad. If you answered with that the fact that they stay around out of reach until they give you one chance to hit them, and you have to sit around waiting, avoiding boring attacks, then you'd be correct. This will be on the test.
Whoa, hold on a second. A test?
Well, now you know. And if you fail, do you know what you get? That is this boss's biggest flaw. That it's just boring waiting around for it to move close enough to actually hit it, and it pretty much only has 3 moves. That are drilling the ground, flamethrowing a small area, and drilling back to back to back to back across the stage. The fact that the ground breaks below you is interesting and all, but regenerates after a few seconds. So all you have to do is move out of the way. So it just ends up not being that interesting. And sometimes the hitboxes for the drills can start up way earlier than the attacks, so sometimes you'll try to jump by a drill and end up getting hit even though it's not even attacking. Now on to the third boss, and oh my, I hate this bot. Oh, I actually like this one. Well, never mind. Anyways, the final boss. Good tells, fast but reactable attacks, and just a good moveset all around. I wish all the bosses were like this. Emperor Nazo. Now, the first phase is fine. It can get a bit overly busy for the small area you fight in, which can make it hard to see yourself at times. And if you watch a bunch of my videos, you know readability is one of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to boss fights. It's the second phase that is such a flick in the nuts. It all comes down to what I talked about earlier, how the on-foot platforming kinda sucks, not to mention the other thing I said earlier about how small drilling spaces, and this really is the ultimate combination of the two. It really is just a whole bunch of stuff to keep track of. The giant lasers, floating skulls that explode, the small platforms that you're supposed to deal with, all while doing this over a giant bottomless pit. It's just a lot for people to handle. And I think the boss fight goes way too overboard with the amount of stuff to deal with. That's all 4 bosses, and I really think the frustration of these started to bleed into the whole experience. That's all 4 bosses, and sadly I think they really soured me on the experience as a whole. The frustration that they started then started to bleed into the stages, and I was just not a really happy camper for the majority of this game. Or maybe I'm just bad. Either way, I see this as a one and done for me, but you might like it, so give it a shot. Maybe when it's on sale. The Steam summer sale's coming up soon enough, so I'd say approach this one with caution. But if you like tough platformers, then I'd say give this one a shot. You might see something in it that I didn't. Well, that's not really how I wanted this video to end. I looked at some other reviews and they're all pretty positive. So I guess it'd just be like that sometimes. Well, what now? I mentioned Elden Ring earlier. You know that DLC is coming out pretty soon. But June's just so far away. I wonder if there's any Souls adjacent games that just came out to buy at the time. Now that the video's over, it's time for you to take that quiz. I'll put a sample question up on the screen for you. Alright, get to it, or you know what might happen. Perfect.